In this series of videos, I'd like to talk about how progress is calculated at Key Stage 2 before having a look at your school's data. Now, the chief book to read is the Primary School Accountability in 2018 document. It's updated about 4 times a year. The last update was in mid-December when the validated figures came out. So it's got a long URL. I just Googled Primary School Accountability in 2018. Make sure you've got the latest document. So if you've got the September document, then you're looking at one version too old. So the December document has a look at the validated Key Stage 2 data. So here's an example of how progress is calculated. Taking James, who has an average Key Stage score of 17 back in Key Stage 1. He is in prior attainment group 19. His results in the maths test was a scaled score of 109. His estimated score is 106, so 109 minus 106 means he has a progress score of +3. There may be a few things to explain from this. How are average Key Stage 1 scores calculated? What are these prior attainment groups? What are estimated Key Stage 2 maths scores? And just how is everything calculated? So we'll start at the beginning with scaled scores. On the 9th of July, when your school's results were presented to you at 7:30 in the morning, this document was also released. It's how to convert Key Stage 2 raw scores to scaled scores. Now, the raw scores are the number of marks that a pupil has attained. So there are 50 marks available in reading, 70 in GPS or SPAG, and 110 over the 3 papers in the maths. Now you need a minimum of 3 marks to get a scaled score of 80. You need most of the marks, maybe not quite all, to get a scaled score of 120. So there is the range, 80 to 120. Now the pass mark is 100. And how the government works out the number of raw score that's needed to get this 100 is that it takes some of the scripts that pupils have done, some of their actual results, mark them early, have a look at the distribution of marks and assign a value of 100 for the pass mark. And they do this because some tests will be more difficult than others. For example, The Way of the Dodo, the third reading text in 2016, was considered to be a bit more difficult than other texts. And so rather than have how many marks his pupils gain year on year with this degree of variability, what the government has done is introduced a scaled score which is comparable year on year. So 100 marks for the scaled score pass is comparable for each year. So the government allocates 3 marks, 3 raw scores to a scaled score of 80. It assigns another place to 120 near the end. It works out where it wants the pass mark to be and then allocates all the other marks from there. So this raw scores to scaled score document is available on the internet. I just Google raw score to scaled scores. Why should you be interested in this document when it comes out in 2019? Well, as you may know, you can challenge the results. You can have the examiners remark the entire script, but it costs a few pounds. However, it's free of charge if you go from a not passing to a passed, so from say 99 scaled score to 100. If you go the other way, and believe it or not, some schools do present a pass mark, an actual passed score. Here is our pupil that got a scaled score of 100. Can you remark it and it turns into a fail? It has happened. Or if you have got a change of 2 raw score marks or more. It used to be 3, it's now 2. So if you've got, say, a scaled score of 99 in maths, well, there may be 5 different raw scores which have a scaled score of 99. So you need to know which one is just 1 mark away from getting the 100 as opposed to 5 marks away, which is worth challenging or not. So that's how I use the raw score to scaled score. you'll notice that your money is not returned if you go from a pass to a high score. So this is how raw scores to scaled scores are converted. The government then puts all the pupils' scaled scores together where they have a similar Key Stage 1 average point score. So there are 24 different groups, these prior attainment groups, each with a similar average point score. And that's the only criterion. It's not the gender or disadvantaged or SEN, it's just the average point score. So you can see James, who had a Key Stage 1 average point score of 17, is in prior attainment group 19, so his national average 106 for maths, 107.5 for reading. And they called this the estimated score. But it's only been capable of being estimated months after the pupils have actually sat their tests. This data doesn't come out until early September. So whether estimated score is the right terminology, I'll leave to you. Ofsted does not require you to work out your pupils' progress using these estimated scores. They say it varies too much from year to year. There is no requirement for you to do so. But how do you work out a Key Stage 1 average point score? Well, this is the old methodology. The average point score is an average of English and maths, but there is no English exam, it's reading and writing. So your reading and writing grades, 2A and 2B, are converted into points and are averaged to make an English grade. Then your English and maths grades are converted to average point scores, and those are averaged out to get your Key Stage 1 average point score. Where a level 2, your mid-prior attainers, is between 12 and 17.99 points. But that's the old method. The new method from 2016 is that your English mark is no longer reconverted into a grade. So what's the difference? Well, under the old version, 17 and 15 was averaged out to 16. There is no point 16. There's no grade for 16 points. So it got converted upwards, rounded upwards to 2A. Under this new version, it doesn't. It gets rounded not to 17, but to 16. And 16 and 13, the average of that is 14.5. This pupil went down by half a point at Key Stage 1. And we found when this change was introduced in 2016 that around a third of pupils lost at least half a grade. So this is how to calculate average point scores. So if we take another example, say someone around Key Stage 1 point score of 14, you can see that these pupils had on average a 50-50% chance of passing reading, of passing maths, and slightly less of passing writing. So this is your pass mark. These pupils who were, say, 2B for reading, 2B for writing, and 2C for maths. So your progress score is the difference between your scaled score and the estimated score, the national average. So if we go back to our previous example and change his Key Stage 1 score to 14, then we can see his estimated score changes, so his progress score is now 8.67. And your school's overall progress score is an average of all of your pupils' progress scores, but only where you have a Key Stage 1 average point score. If you don't have a Key Stage 1 average point score, then you have no progress. However, there is a problem with this. Individual pupils could have a really terrible time. Maybe you have a level 3 pupil who is expected to get around 110, 112, had a really bad time, and only managed to get 3 raw marks, a scaled score of 80. You know, something dreadful happened to him in his personal life, for instance. Yes, you can apply for special consideration, but even so, minus 30 progress. And let's say you're in a school with 30 pupils. Well, that means that one pupil has brought your progress scores down by an entire point, you know, from +2 to +1 or from -2 to -3. Well, the government has recognised that that is a problem, and in 2018 has assigned a series of minimum progress scores below which your pupils cannot go. Now, these scores are the scores achieved by the bottom 1% of all pupils. So if we had this example where this pupil scored minus 30, who was a level 3, that's an average point score 21, then instead of minus 30, bringing your school down by an entire point, it would go down to about minus 12. So bringing your school down by about 0.4. You can see that the minimum progress scores are small for your high priority attainers, those with an average point score of 18 or above, and get progressively wider the lower down you go. So this is the government's trying to stop the effect of outliers from bringing down the entirety of your school in one fell swoop. In the next video, we'll have a look at those pupils who did not get entered into the test. Now, not all pupils are entered into the SATs. Around 1 child in 40 is not. You get to make the decision in about March or April when you enter the letter B next to the pupils' names in NCA tools. So for those pupils, we go back to the teacher assessment. So foundations, PKF, we get 73 points. PKE 76 and PKG 79. These are called points. For me, they're still scaled scores. So we have the main scaled score of 80 to 120 for those pupils who enter the test and get at least 3 marks. Those who don't, it goes down to 73 to 79. But what about pupils who get entered into the test and don't get 3 marks? Well, this has changed over the last 2 years. Now, all of those pupils will get 79, which gives me a question. Let's say you have a pupil who finds the Key Stage 2 study challenging, but on a good day might get 5 scores, 5 raw marks. Should you enter them into the test? Well, let's just look mathematically at what might happen. If you enter them into the test, then they will get a higher scaled score, say 82, as opposed to the teacher assessment, maximum of 79. That means that their progress figure will be higher. So the question is then, what do Ofsted look for more? Progress? And the answer is yes. They want progress. Now what happens if you enter them into the test and they don't get the 3 raw marks? Well, the worst that can happen is we fall back to the teacher assessment. So you're guaranteed to get at least the same number of marks, if not more, if you enter them into the test, based on the methodology that we've seen over the past few years. But of course, anything can change. It's at this point that I remind everybody that your number 1 consideration, your prime concern, must be your welfare of your children. There are some pupils that it would be cruel to require them to sit the tests. Now, of course, you could have some provision, like allowing them to be in a separate room, which may assist them. So some pupils can go in. Some borderline cases, you may want to consider seriously allowing them to sit the test. Please note that if there's, say, 3 maths papers, they would have to sit all 3. They can't just sit the first and then not sit the other 2. They would be marked as absent. But your pupils' concern, your welfare, is your primary concern. All I can tell you is how the maths looks. Now, this doesn't get into account pupils who aren't even at PKF, who are below the standard of the interim pre-key stage. Well, for those who are below BLW, in 2016 they got a scaled score of 70. This was seen by many to be unfair because the estimated score, the national average, was 78. So your pupils on P scales were guaranteed to have a progress score of -8. So in 2017, the government decided to extend this range so that it is reflective of the P scales, all the way down to 59 points. Now, this might seem even more complicated, but it's actually fairer to your P scale pupils. Let me explain. Let's say you have a pupil who was at Key Stage 1 a P4. Let's say he was P4 in reading, writing, maths, or English and maths. That would make a scaled score of 1.75. And let's say they've advanced to a P8 over those 4 years. So they're now at a 69 level. So 69 scaled score. Let's have a look at where 1.75 would be. They would be in prior attainment group 2. As part of this change, an additional 4 prior attainment groups were added, and information from special schools were inserted to enable this cohort to be still statistically valid. So the national average was 67, they actually got 69, therefore they made a progress score of plus 1.7. So your P-scale pupils were no longer guaranteed a progress score of -8. So this was much fairer. Now in 2019, P-scales P5 to P8 and the PKF, PKE, PKG measures that we had seen here are all going to go away in favour of standards 1 to 6 at Key Stage 2. P1 to P4 is going to remain for another few years. But this is how pupils working below the standard of the test are evaluated in terms of their teacher assessment in 2018. Writing at Key Stage 2 is not an exam assessed, it's teacher assessed, and therefore the scale that we've just been seeing with 79 and below has been extended upwards for writing. Working at the expected standard has been assigned 103 scaled score, at the greater depth 113, and working towards 91, so everything else is 79 and below. In 2017, Ofsted was concerned with the quality of teacher assessments at Key Stage 2, and they said treat data from teacher assessments, especially writing, at Key Stage 2 with some caution. In June 2018, a new report came out, a research paper, which said that these concerns are less significant now, and in 2017 in the IDSR, there was a statement saying treat this with some caution. This statement has disappeared in the 2018 IDSR, so we think that Ofsted are now more confident with regard to the use of writing teacher assessments. If you're wondering what the distribution is like, what does your progress score actually mean, then the government has published this. So you can see to be in the top 25% of schools in reading or maths, you need 1.7% or above. If you want to know more precisely where you are, then please go to our website, DAISI We have a blog, Key Stage 2 Rankings. And in this blog, you will find, for instance, reading progress. if you look up your school's progress score exactly where you are. So if you have a score of, let's say, 1.5, you are in the top 30% of schools. So just go to DAISI Education and go to the Key Stage 2 rankings page. Now, because you have these steps for writing, 113, 103, 91, you can't assign somebody a Scout score of 108, for instance, which means they will have progress score of +5 or -5. And this is reflected in the floor standard in 2018. So either your school gets at least -5 in reading, -5 in maths and -7 in writing, or you get combined reading, writing, maths score of 65% or more. This was quite difficult in 2016 when the national average was 53%. In 2018, the national average is 64-65%, so much easier. Please note, you have to get all 3 progress scores, not just one of them as it used to be in 2015. There is also the coasting standard. It's not -5, it's -2.5. Not 65%, but 85%. Much tougher standard. However, you only have to pass it once every 3 years. Now, the consequence, and very few schools are exempt if you are a very small school under 11 pupils, or if you don't have sufficient Key Stage 1 assessments. Now, in 2017, if you went below the coasting standard, then the Regional Schools Commissioner would engage the school to consider its wider context and decide whether additional support was needed. And what this meant in reality, according to a Freedom of Information request, out of around 800 schools, 1 was closed. 52% of the others, the Regional School Commissioner engaged with the school, see if additional support was needed, and decided no, it wasn't. In 2018, Ofsted are not going to take into account floor and coasting standards. This will be exclusively something to do with the Regional Schools Commissioner. It's no longer on the front page of the IDSR, for instance. It is no longer going to be used to issue an automatic academy order. Only an inadequate Ofsted judgment will do that. And the floor and coasting standard in 2019 is going to be changed. The government is going to issue some consultations about how it can be changed, but until they come out, we do not know what the standard will be in 2019, only that it will be different. So this is how progress is worked out in Key Stage 2. So in the next video, we'll return to the document and have a look and see how it is presented. Thank you very much for watching this video. Why not like us and subscribe to this channel? And why not subscribe to our free premium mailing list, where you can get 10% off our best prices and advance notice on what's happening.